Bringing you the top stories from Bonners Ferry to St. Mary's and everywhere in between, this is the North Idaho Prepcast with Ryan Scaggs.
That's right. It's the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, breaking down everything happening in District 1 in the state of Idaho. It's brought to you by the Idaho Division of Public Health. Brandon Baney back with Ryan Scaggs for another edition. Ryan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
I recovered from Friday night's craziness that happened at Coeur d'Alene High School.
Yeah, that was such a thrilling game, and we will get to that momentarily, but I feel like we got to start with soccer because it is state tournament time. State soccer has arrived. There's a lot of good teams from the north, but I think the biggest story we have to start with is at the 4A level, Ryan. I feel bad. I feel like we maybe jinxed.
Are we responsible for the
Sandpoint girls soccer was undefeated through the entire regular season, won the combined 5A, 4A Inland Empire League, beat Coeur d'Alene Charter, beat all the 5A schools, but all it takes is one slip up. And in the district championship game against Moscow scores on a penalty kick in the 51st minute. Sandpoint outshot Moscow 17-3 in that game, but Moscow made it count. And so Sandpoint loses 1-0. Sorry, no at-large bid, no chance to play your way into state. You're sitting at home. That's just
it's you see the at-large in the 5A, which Lewiston got in the hard way, and they made it on the boys' side. Not having that at-large, that play-in game hurts. Oof. I mean, you have the number one team in the state that misses the state playoffs. It's a heartbreaker. And so I don't want to take claim that we did jinx them, but because they did have an amazing season. But yeah, I mean, you got to take care of every week, every game. You got to take care of business. There's no really. We talked about it kind of at the beginning of the year. In the north, you don't really get to have that slip up and expect to get in and get that guarantee. And that's what happened to Sandpoint. I mean, probably the best. I would say it's still the best team in the state of Idaho in 4A girls. Is sitting at home watching the state tournament this week, and that's not a slight to anybody else in the tournament. But man, they had an amazing season, and what they did in league was crazy. So for them to miss the state tournament is definitely a disappointment for them. As an understatement, I'm sure it's probably pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But hats off to Moscow. I mean, they did what they had to do to get in.
That's right. They at 8-8 now. They're the number 8 seed at state.
Headed to state. That's right.
So, I mean, talking about, we joke on here that this Prepcast is the Rodney Dangerfield Prepcast, right? Can't get any respect up north. I know the perception up north a lot of the times is, oh, well, the IHSAA doesn't really represent the state of Idaho. It represents the state of Ada County and Boise, right?
Yeah.
And it happens so often with representation, right? We talked about the Clark Fork football team is going to be 6-2, not able to play in the playoffs. Sandpoint soccer, not going to be able to play. And I understand that the districts up north are smaller, right? So it is hard to give the league 2 bids every year. It has to rotate. But isn't a simple solution that if you are coming from a district or a league that gets 1 bid, shouldn't your second place team be allowed the opportunity to play their way into state with a play-in game? Why is the rule that there's only 1 play-in match for each classification? Why not have all the second place teams play each other in 3 or 4 play-in matches, and then you really would earn your way into state?
I obviously I think in soccer would be a little bit more difficult because you'd have to extend the season for that to take place, or at least have it or just force all the district games to be over by Wednesday, so you could have like a Thursday, Friday, or Friday, Saturday play-in tournament, I guess, per se, to get those 4 teams in. It's difficult to see. I mean, and from the coach's standpoint, how I used to coach in District 1, sometimes you'll get some really solid programs that get left out, and not having that play-in, it's kind of a disservice to getting the best team. I mean, is your goal to get the best teams in the state tournament, or is it just for equal numbers? And that's what, I mean, the state has to take a look at. I think they, with the recalculations, the reclassifications that they've done, they've got to take a serious look at adding those play-ins for those smaller districts, because you could have some really strong teams that are on the outside looking in that don't really get their shot, that I guarantee are probably better than the number 4 or the number 5 from District 3 or District 5 or whatever it be. So, it's difficult to see Sandpoint miss. Obviously, you have to take care of what's in front of you and not hope that, somebody helps you out to get in. But, moving forward, I mean, there's no reason that Idaho can't extend that. I mean, I think at least for adding 2 more days to the season to make sure that everybody gets in that should be there. Why not?
I mean, you're only adding 1 game. I mean, think about it. There's 6 districts, right? And you have the second place team from each of those play. You have 3 instead of 1 state play-in match. You have 3 state play-in matches, and they can all be held at various sites that rotate and alternate
halfway. Like basketball plays in Grangeville half the time. I mean, why not?
And it's to me, it's a really easy fix. But
no, it really is an easy fix, and I think it just comes down to you have more ADs in one district that get to argue against 3 in another. And so the voices in the room get a little bit louder. I think the competitive balance for our state tournaments would be better if we added the play-in scenario. And it doesn't have to be every district has a play-in. I mean, you just look at the ones like I think District 5 and 4A only has 3 teams. District 1 has 3 teams. So give those the number 2 from each of those districts a play-in chance against, say, it's easier to do it regionally to where 5 plays District 6's number 4 seed and District 3's number 5 seed plays District 1-2's number 2 seed. I mean, that's a really easy solution to add. And like you said, it's only adding 1 game.
Yeah, for each team. So And I didn't mean to get so far into the weeds on this, but another thing that's really grinding my gears or chapping my what is in volleyball this year. In 1A D1 volleyball, you have a 3-team league, right, with Wallace and Lakeside and Genesis Prep. The champion of that district doesn't even get to go to state. They advance to a play-in match. How disrespectful is that you're a district champ? I think the district champions automatically should get to go to state. There should be something to celebrate there. I think Wallace probably wins that district, and instead they've got to turn around and go play a team from District 2 just to get to state. That is such a disrespect, in my opinion.
No, and name another district that happens to, or in any classification. I mean, name another. And I coached for, before I came to Idaho, what was it, 13 years in the state of Washington? That was never an issue. You're guaranteed, if you win your league, you're guaranteed a state playoff berth. And so any other state around us, I mean, Montana, you can speak for that one. Oregon, I know how they do their system. League champs get in, and district champs especially get in. Washington's playoff system is a little bit bigger because, depending on the classification, you may have 100 or 67 high schools, for example, in 2A in the state of Washington. That's 5A, 4A, 3A combined in the state of Idaho. So it's a little bit different picture, but if anybody else can do it, why can't we? I mean, it's, we have the ability to marginalize the rules a little bit to make sure that, like you said, that we keep talking about competitive balance. Let's reward the teams that take care of business. Why penalize somebody to, have a risk of running into a number 6 seed from somewhere else and losing that match? And now you're like, well, congratulations on your district title, but you don't go state. That doesn't happen anywhere else. So I'm with you. It doesn't make any sense. And that if we've got a gripe, I think that's where our legit gripe lies right now.
Yeah. And again, to our audience, right, we're preaching to the choir of the fans up north, but for everybody else in the state of Idaho that thinks, the fans up north just complain all the time. There's evidence to suggest that time and again that the teams up north do get slighted. So
absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll get off my soapbox now, Ryan. Let's
talk about soccer.
Let's talk about soccer. Let's bring it back. Let's bring it back in here.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to start on the boys' side, 5A Lake City, the number 1 overall seed, plays Lewiston, who won the play-in game.
Right.
Yeah, and obviously it's a rematch of the district title game. Lewiston surprised Coeur d'Alene and won that one. So Lewiston's on a bit of a roll. I mean, you can really look at things, and Lake City being at the top of the bracket, they're playing down in Eagle. Lake City's got a good draw. I really think that they are the overall favorite, overwhelming favorite to win it all. Timberline and Bora kind of floating around out there that probably going to have something to say about it. Boise's a solid program too. But as far as looking at the draw, Lake City's got the better draw to get to the final championship game.
Absolutely. If you're watching the video of this on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel or our Facebook page, you'll see that I've got the brackets here up on the screen. Might want to go full screen just so you can see it more clearly. But if you're listening to the audio, you can just try to follow along as best you can. But yeah, Lake City's the number 1 overall seed. They're playing number 8 Lewiston. Number 4 Thunder Ridge, number 5 Boise are on their side of the bracket. I agree with you, Ryan. This is a great draw. I personally think it's going to come down to Lake City and Bora, the 3 seed in the title match. That's just my kind of personal opinion. But
yeah, and you know that SIC conference, they beat up on each other every week down there, so you don't really get a good beat on, you know, who maybe the dominant team is, because they're all going to split at some point. I kind of guarantee that. But no, I mean, Lake City's got a great draw. Boise's solid. I mean, let's be honest. But you know, that bottom half, they're just going to beat the snot out of each other. I mean, it's going to be a meat grinder, and you could look. I wouldn't be surprised that 7 seed beats the 2 seed. That wouldn't shock me any one bit at all. Of Madison beating Timberline, you just never know. Especially Rocky sitting there with Bora. Rocky's a solid team too. So yeah, 5A soccer is going to be pretty. I think the balance is pretty much there. Lewiston kind of looks like the outlier a little bit, and that's not to slight the Bengals at all. They've been on a roll lately, but just record-wise and everything else, what we've seen from the season, you know, I think it's 1 through 7 is pretty competitive.
It's really funny this year that they've gone to seeding the state tournaments based upon your max preps ratings to avoid having conference teams play each other for the 4th, 5th time. But the way it's worked out in a lot of these soccer brackets is you've got conference opponents playing each other. But as long as they're seeded that way, I'm okay with it.
Yeah,
as long as it's not predetermined.
You know, and so looking at the 4A, I mean, in Caldwell, you got Sandpoint taking on Canyon Ridge. Sandpoint's got a good draw as well. I mean, they're to the top of their bottom bracket. You've got Hillcrest. It's a solid team too. Jerome's really good too. Let's be honest. You know, Sandpoint can make some noise. I wouldn't be surprised. Top 4 finish guaranteed. I won't say guaranteed. Nothing's ever guaranteed, but I mean, definitely within the realm of possibility for them. So, you know, the Bulldogs are a solid team that are rolling late. So, I mean, they've got their chances in front. They just got to take care of business and play. I mean, we don't cover soccer a ton here in North Idaho because, you know, and I think that it's becoming, and we talked about it in last week's Prepcast, but that it's becoming more popular. It's getting more notoriety, which is going to get more eyeballs on it.
Yep.
And so Sandpoint's been a solid program. They have historically been good. So, yeah, Sandpoint, I would say top 4 finish for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if they're in the title game. But yeah.
Yeah, Sandpoint comes in as the number 3 seed. They're going to play 6th seeded Canyon Ridge. And I think that matchup could be potentially more difficult than a semifinal against either Hillcrest or Preston would be. Yep. And I agree with you. I like Sandpoint to represent the North. I like Caldwell, the 5 seed, coming out of that top half of the bracket. Jerome had a lot of ties in the regular season, and because of that, their max preps rating got inflated a little bit. So I really do think Caldwell beat Bishop Kelly on penalty kicks in the SIC championship game last week. So I like Caldwell against Sandpoint, and Caldwell's a good team. I think they're a team to watch out for. Sandpoint would have their hands full there.
Sure. Oh, well, and they can run too. I mean, let's be honest. Like Caldwell gets out there, they can move the ball up and down the field. So,
yep.
I mean, they're stealing from their football team. Let's put it that way.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
To go into 3As, I mean, Bonners Ferry playing Coeur d'Alene Charter last week in that district championship game, going to PKs. It was exciting. I mean, let's just be honest about that game was pretty interesting to settle a district championship. Coeur d'Alene Charter getting McCall, I think is a generous draw for them in the first round. Sun Valley, you know, that school's, they're good. Let's be honest. So I would equate them to like the Coeur d'Alene Charter girls. I mean, yes, as far as level goes compared to the rest of the bracket. But Coeur d'Alene Charter got a decent draw. I really do. Bonners Ferry playing Sugar Salem. I mean, that could be a 50-50 game for all we know. I don't know enough about, you know, your neck of the woods in soccer to make a claim on Sugar. You probably know a little bit more than I. Bonners Ferry is a solid program. I mean, they're on the upswing as far as soccer goes. So you never know. They could be hungry and pull a shocker. It wouldn't surprise me one bit. 3A soccer, obviously, you get to this level at state. You usually get 1 or 2 teams that are head and shoulders above everybody else, and then it's how everybody got shuffled into the deck. So
yes. So Bonners Ferry is the 6th seed playing 3rd seeded Sugar Salem. I do like Sugar Salem better in that matchup.
Sure.
Sugar's had a couple of matches this year, a lot of crooked scores where it's like 20-0 and
Oof.
like 16-0. They've really had some eye-opening performances. On the top half of the bracket, Coeur d'Alene Charter against the 4 seed against the 5th seed McCall Donnelly. McCall Donnelly upset Weiser, the 2nd best team in the state, in the district championship on penalty kicks, and this kind of like a Sandpoint thing. Weiser's only loss came to Sun Valley, yet they're sitting at home. So you've got a Coeur d'Alene Charter team that I think gets to the semifinals pretty easily, but Sun Valley Community School is so good. They probably will win the 3A boys title yet again. But for Coeur d'Alene Charter, they have the opportunity. So
yeah, and they could get a top 4 finish and still bring home some hardware. So
yeah,
sure. Yeah, they got their chances. On the girls' side, if you want to go 5A, Lake City drawing Timberline in the first round. Lake City, the 4 seed. Highlands out there. Lake City, we've seen. I mean, they played tough soccer this year. I mean, let's be honest there. I don't think that they're the overwhelming like what we saw with Sandpoint, as far as top to bottom of their lineup, being able to score. It's Lake City's got a couple really solid players. They did what they needed to do to win the 5A championship in their league, and did it pretty soundly. So Lake City's been able to be consistent all year. I like them against Timberline in the first round. Highland, I think, would give them a huge test in a semifinal match. And when you get to this point, you don't know if they're on a roll. Highland could be just absolutely tearing through people and blow them out. Lake City could be playing them tough and win 1-0. I mean, either score would not surprise me one bit. On the bottom half of that bracket, I really do think Rocky's the one that comes out of the bottom, and I think Rocky could win it all. I mean, that girls team, just following a little bit of what I've seen them do down the stretch to some teams, Rocky's playing really tough. And I think that, they could pull a surprise maybe and win the championship. Highland's good though. So, I mean, it's kind of 1A, 1B there. But that would be my championship prediction. I would say Highland and Rocky Mountain. Okay.
I've got Highland and Boise in mine, and I've got Boise winning. They've got such a good girls soccer program at Boise High. Highland is the big wild card because they went undefeated in the regular season, but their strength of schedule, how good was it, right? The East this year in Idaho 5A soccer, girls soccer wasn't very good. So that's going to be the big question.
And they didn't join like Madison and a couple of the other teams that came up north and traveled earlier in the season. Right. And we saw what the North did to that district for those teams that came up. I mean, they spanked them. The teams up here took care of business. So if you want to kind of do the prediction there and just go based on competitive balance, yeah, I mean, I think the Boise schools are definitely kind of have the overall edge right now. But Lake City, I think, definitely is seated correctly as far as what they're able to do. And I think, they could play in that 3-4 matchup, definitely.
Yep, for sure. 4A girls, nothing to talk about there because we already did talk about.
We already cried. Yeah, we
already poured one out for Sandpoint. So
otherwise, it would have been my favorite. But yeah, so in 3A, you've got Coeur d'Alene Charter, the 2 seed, and the only reason that you're 2 seed, in my opinion, I mean, and no slight to Fruitland, was just that loss to Sandpoint. I think that they probably would have been the 1 seed had they not played that Sandpoint game last minute. I got Coeur d'Alene Charter as my favorite. They're going to win it. And I'll make the prediction now. I mean, it's a competitive bracket, and Fruitland's a solid team too. Timberlake, though, the 8 seed playing Fruitland in the first round. Sorry, Tigers, that's a tough draw. But, you never know what happens. They could, if they lose that game, I still think that they could maybe place on the backside of the bracket too. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that Timberlake could be taking home hardware. I just think Coeur d'Alene Charter was that good in the regular season that Timberlake probably in any other year would have been uber competitive up north. Just Coeur d'Alene Charter is that good. I mean, they're pedigree that people recognize, but they've got a program built that just is kind of a factory right now.
Yep. I think Fruitland and Coeur d'Alene Charter are on a collision course. Rebecca Hines, of course, such a great player for the Panthers. Fruitland has a girl, Abby Rubidoux, who's averaging 9 points per game. Points is goals and assists, which kind of tells you their offensive firepower.
Yeah.
But I like Coeur d'Alene Charter there. Coach Stacy Smith has such a great program in place there.
Defensively, they are so sound. And so that's why I think that they can slow down a Fruitland, because offensively they can score. We all know that. But defensively, I think that really gives them the edge, that they're going to be able to slow down those teams that really like to get out and run.
Yep, I agree. So, all right, let's transition to football. But before we do, let's hear from our sponsors, the Idaho Division of Public Health, and then we'll come back and break down all the football action this week as well. We'll be back right after this on the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
It's time to start planning for back to school. That's why I got my kids vaccinated for COVID-19. Kids 12 and older can get vaccinated. The vaccines have been researched and tested. They're safe and they work. And I hope everyone will choose to get vaccinated too.
Back on the North Idaho Prepcast, IdahoSports.com, Brandon Baney with Ryan Scaggs. Let's transition to football now. What a wild game here on Friday night. Post Falls beats Coeur d'Alene 32-27 and completely gums up the works in the Inland Empire League.
Yeah, and it was kind of a game I don't think anybody really saw coming. Going into the game, I didn't want to say like I had all but like Coeur d'Alene guaranteed to win that game. I said it would take a really, really awesome offensive performance from Sandpoint to show up, or so from Post Falls to show up and make that competitive. Post Falls defense, man, I tell you what, they looked awesome. And nothing to Banks. I mean, he kind of had a lame right leg. He injured it about halfway through the first half, just the start of the second quarter. You could tell he had something going on. He wasn't at full strength, but that I don't think was as much of a factor as just how well Post Falls' defensive scheme. I mean, Coeur d'Alene rushed the ball, I believe, for like 41 yards. Post Falls did what Sandpoint did to Coeur d'Alene. It just Post Falls got a little bit more offense than Sandpoint did when they played him earlier this year. Jackson Anderson, I mean, kid was a stud on Friday night. And I mean, would be it passing the ball or rushing? He had a phenomenal game. I believe it was 2 rushing touchdowns and then passed for 3 more. So had an awesome game. Zach Clark getting that reception right there with 27 seconds left. The 61-yard bomb down to the inside the 10-yard line. That was an awesome game. The finish to that game was unbelievable. I mean, Coeur d'Alene had their shot at the end too. So, I mean, that was crazy in itself to see Julio get the ball and go 45 yards and take it inside the 20 to give Coeur d'Alene a chance. But Post Falls made the stand at the end. They tried to hit Cope in the end zone and ball went incomplete and game was over. It was an exciting game though. Man, it was a good game.
Coeur d'Alene's been in a lot of those this year, a lot of those games that are coming right. And Post Falls has 2 for that.
Yeah.
So now it all kind of sets up this week, Ryan, in the 5A Inland Empire League. Coeur d'Alene is backed in a corner. They have to win just to potentially force a tie. So
I don't know if they're going to get the at-large if they lose. I don't know if there's that room for failure on their part.
Which is just crazy to think about. But so basically, Post Falls hosts Lake City this week. Lewiston travels to Coeur d'Alene. Neither one of those games is a slam dunk because Lewiston only beat Lake City 35-28 last week. It's not like Lewiston blew them out of the water. Right now, Lewiston is in the driver's seat. If Lewiston defeats Coeur d'Alene, they win the conference. And then Coeur d'Alene would need Post Falls to lose to Lake City to take second place and grab that automatic bid. If Lewiston beats Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls beats Lake City, then Lewiston takes first, Post Falls takes second. Coeur d'Alene is now fighting for the at-large bid. And we talked about right now, it would be very close between they and some of those Boise schools that potentially
Capital and Bora,
could be fighting for a playoff spot.
Yeah, and the hard part too for Coeur d'Alene is that they lost that extra game to one of the Washington schools. So it actually hurts their overall average because they're game shy of everybody else.
Yes.
So I mean, and record-wise, their percentage would be a little bit lower, but we talked about it off air, but it's like, it's looking like you're going to have the one-legged sack race on alternating Sundays to settle this one, for the Denslow Cup, for a basketball reference. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. The 5A, I was just like trying to write it out, and there's literally 6 different scenarios that can take place, of how this thing gets settled. I mean, depending on who wins and who loses and, where things kind of settle through. It's it's kind of a funky situation that the 5A is in that we haven't really seen the last few years because it's been, with that at large, it's been so like settled between Post Falls or Lewiston or whoever having such a good year that number 3 team is like, oh yeah, you're guaranteed to get in. That's not there this year. I mean, I think that the balance is lifted a little bit down south to take away that guarantee. Usually you can count on getting that at large. Lewiston, hats off to them. The Bengals have had a great year. No matter what happens, they're in. Yeah, so Lewiston, I mean, they're going to be in whether they're the 1 seed or the 2 seed, they're in because they do have that win over Post Falls. The Coeur d'Alene Post Falls situation is just crazy. It gets really messy really quick.
The way they determine the at-large bid in 5A is your winning percentage against quote-unquote big schools, which is other 5A opponents, as well as out-of-state opponents that have an enrollment of 1280 or larger. So all those Washington schools that Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls and Lewiston have played, those all count. And like Lehigh, right? That game at the Rocky Mountain Rumble, that counts for Coeur d'Alene, but it's a loss. So that hurts them. And like you said, they've had one less game than those Boise schools because they played Sandpoint, which won't count towards their quote-unquote big school total.
Yeah.
So
most of us have to worry about it. I mean, because they're not in the at-large picture. I mean, their one situation would be the downfall playing Clarkston, which is my alma mater, because they've got an enrollment under 900. So that's not going to enter the picture. But Post Falls, I mean, they played Moses Lake, they played Pasco. Those teams in the state of Washington are big schools. So they would be a little bit better because they have the wins over those schools. Coeur d'Alene didn't schedule any small schools this year. So, I mean, that one benefit to them, but they did lose the one game to another big school as far as having that canceled due to COVID. So that kind of gums it up just a little bit. But
yes. So Lewiston doesn't have any losses to big schools. So you could have a 3-way tie for the Inland Empire League as well. If Post Falls beats Lake City and Coeur d'Alene beats Lewiston, then all 3 teams are 3-1, all beating each other. And I reached out to some of the athletic directors up north, didn't hear back on how that tie would be decided. But if Lewiston, for some reason, didn't get one of the 2 automatic bids, they're going to get that at-large spot because they're 2 games up on everybody in the loss column when it comes to the big school records. So Lewiston's in no matter what. So Post Falls needs to win and at this point be on the right side of either a 3-way tie where they get an auto bid. I think that's their only shot.
Yeah.
Post Falls trails too many teams in the loss column.
Yeah, I mean, they just had too many losses early in the season that it's coming back to hurt them a little bit.
So it's going to be fascinating. I hope all 3 teams qualify because I think all 3 of those teams are better than the 7th best team from Boise. That's what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to either the 3rd best team from the North or the 7th best team from Boise. That's what's going to determine this. And there's just too much unknown with those Boise schools playing those cross-divisional games this week to really know how that's going to shake out. But Coeur d'Alene needs to win. I would say certainly Post Falls needs to win, and that's the easiest way to punch your ticket.
Yes, and some of those SIC teams down in Boise might be playing a team for the second time too. So I don't know what that does to the percentages and all that stuff. If that comes into account, if you have to play the same team twice, I mean, it's weird. Like I said, it's the one-legged sack race on alternating Sundays.
Yeah, pretty much. So,
4A, I think it's a little bit more clear. Obviously, Sandpoint took care of business, beat Moscow 42-6 last week. 4A, Sandpoint wins, they're the champs. Lakeland wins, they're the champs. Then I pretty much have settled that either team is guaranteed to get in as an at-large. If Sandpoint loses to Lakeland, Sandpoint I still think gets that guaranteed seed. I think that they're going to have the better max preps rating over Preston to where they would be a guaranteed slot instead of an at-large bid. Lakeland, obviously, I think gets in just on the at-large side of things. So they'd be a little bit lower seed. But both teams definitely, no matter what happens this week, I'm pretty much guaranteeing to see them in the playoffs.
Yep.
Yeah.
For
Sandpoint, we have that game here on IdahoSports.com.
Yes. So that's going to be huge. And for Sandpoint, they're playing for, like we said, both teams are in comfortably. for Sandpoint, they're playing for potentially home field advantage through the semifinals, as we talked about with the Max Preps ratings. For Lakeland, they're playing for a first-round bye, or not a first-round bye, but a top 5 seed and a home game for the quarterfinals. I don't think they're high enough to jump into the top 2, certainly, but for Sandpoint, there's a lot on the line in this game.
Absolutely. In Sandpoint, I don't want to say you look at common opponents because, this time of year we've seen how that goes to backfire and blow up in our face, but Lakeland plays Moscow and wins 59-0. Sandpoint goes down to Moscow and wins 42-6. And it's the same team, back-to-back weeks. Things just look different because of different offenses too. So things come out differently. You don't know what Sandpoint did when they called off the dogs. I do know Lakeland put in their backups early in the third quarter, and they still just boat raced them, so it didn't make it too much of a difference. But it's and the weird thing in all of this too, that you could have a couple losses from teams like Bonneville and Century again, and Burley and like even Blackfoot. Moscow could weirdly sneak in as an at-large team, which it would take a miracle, but they're not mathematically eliminated yet, which is flipping crazy to me. But yeah.
What's going to hurt them this week is they don't play anybody.
Yeah, exactly. They have the bye this week, and so that does hurt a little bit. But mathematically, you're saying there's a chance to avoid Christmas. So yeah, it's Sandpoint I think has more to lose this week than Lakeland, just because of being in the top 3 seeds in Max Preps ratings. Sandpoint definitely wants to be hosting late in the playoffs. That's a huge advantage. If they're getting a home game in November, on the shores of Lake Pondere, that definitely plays to the Bulldogs' favor, and especially travel because you're going to be probably playing a District 6 team. So that definitely is going to bode well for you.
Yes, that's so crucial for Sandpoint this week. 3A Intermountain League. Timberlake, this was the big showdown we were waiting for. Timberlake versus Kellogg. Tigers proved, at least for a week, hey, we're still the class of the league. They came through with a nice 27-14 victory. Yeah,
and decisive victory, I think, but when the dust settles, they figured out what was going on up front on the offensive line. Their fullback was able to move back in the backfield again, went off 155 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, and able to solidify that victory. And they looked good. Defensively, they all but shut down. Luna did have a couple touchdowns. He had 2 passing touchdowns, but just, it was like bend but don't break, but they didn't give up the farm. They really did settle in and weather the storm that Kellogg really couldn't get their offense moving enough to have enough of a difference in the ball game. And the Tigers looked good. I should say the Timberlake Tigers looked good. So, but they got tested in front of them this week playing Bonners Ferry, and there's playoff implications still at stake. They win, they control their own destiny. If they win, they're district champs, league champs. They're going to get the first round bye, and the guaranteed, nice slots where you're watching everybody beat each other up for a week. Bonners Ferry controls their own destiny too. If they win, they force the tiebreak. If they lose, pretty much good job. You had a great season, Badgers, but it's over for them, and Kellogg could be the 2 seed. Just because of the head-to-head. But it could get interesting if Bonners Ferry wins and you got the 3-way tie with the Kansas City tiebreaker. So,
fan-wise, I think people would love to see that.
We want chaos, let's be honest.
Right? Kellogg is going to be the biggest Timberlake fans this week, right? If Timberlake wins, then Kellogg gets into the playoffs. They don't have to sweat it out. If it goes to the Kansas City playoff, and Bonners Ferry would need to beat Timberlake to do that, then you've got a 3-way tie between, and this is assuming Kellogg beats Priest River, which I don't think is a stretch. But then in the Kansas City tiebreak, really anything can happen.
Yep. You could see Timberlake being left home. If it goes to Kansas City tiebreak and somebody gets hot in the red zone and it just fits their offense better, you could see Kellogg the 1 seed and Bonners Ferry the 2 seed. It just wouldn't surprise me one bit. So, and if somebody's got a kicker, you never know. Like they just end zone, this game, the oblong football week takes weird bounces, but kickers could decide it's Kansas City tiebreak even. So it gets interesting this last week is fun. I mean, let's be honest, but we kind of want chaos. But
yeah, and for those that may not know, the Kansas City tiebreak, it's kind of like when football teams do a jamboree, right? Team A plays Team B. Team A has the ball starting at the 35-yard line. You have X amount of time or X amount of plays to try and score. Then Team B plays Team C, and eventually through this modified process, one team gets eliminated. So
yeah, it's you have play clock, but no running clock. It's essentially like overtime rules, but I don't know if they modified it. I think they maybe start at their 35 now. I can't remember if they changed that a couple of years ago. I've only had to do it one time, and it's as a coach, it makes you freak out. You have to like be chewing Tums the entire time, but
yes.
Yeah. It gets interesting. But yeah, no, and it's as a fan, it's fun, but it's like, 35 minutes of football and you're done. So
right. At least it's better. They're settling it that way. I reached out in District 5 where American Falls, Marsh Valley, and Snake River are. There's a potential for a 3-way tie there as well. And I said, how does that get determined? They said, well, we have a coin flip. Whoever wins that coin flip, the 2 losers of the coin flip have a second coin flip. And that's how we determine the 2 playoff spots.
It's like drawing straws.
Yeah, I'd rather do the Kansas City tiebreak than flip a coin. But
yeah, you want to settle things on the field. Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. All right. 2A Central Idaho League. St. Mary's 0-0 in conference. We finally have some clarity. Grangeville beat Orofino last week. This week, St. Mary's plays Orofino. St. Mary's with a win would then play Grangeville for basically the title and the one playoff spot that league is going to get on October 29th. If Orofino wins, then you look at the possibility of a 3-way tie, and there's all sorts of complicated stuff. I personally think St. Mary's takes care of business, beats Orofino, and who knows, that game against Grangeville could go either way.
Yeah, that Grangeville game could be a coin flip. I think, we talked about last week a little bit. Both teams look to be down this year. Grangeville's schedule, obviously, they scheduled up like crazy. They played a ton of 3A teams. But I think they played one 4A team. They played Moscow. So Grangeville's schedule, I don't think is indicative of like how good they could be at the 2A level. But it's St. Mary's played a tough schedule too. They played a lot of Washington 1A schools and even playing Lakeland. So the test will be St. Mary's had a few weeks off. So in their schedule. So they've got a chance to kind of regroup and have some practice time to put things back together. So it'll be really interesting. I think they beat Orofino for sure. I mean, I don't want to say anything's ever guaranteed, but they've got a really good shot. Orofino's down this year, and losing. And you look at common opponents too, and Orofino getting beat by Kellogg pretty handily. So it's a. I think the Loggers pull out the victory on Friday, play for the championship next week.
Yep.
And it would have playoff feel because it would be technically the first week of the playoffs because they're playing during that play-in week. So, I mean, it has playoff implications. I would treat it as such. So, if I was a coach.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly what happened last year because it's the same exact thing happened where COVID-19 ran through St. Mary's and Grangeville last fall. Yeah. And so you had the 2 teams play each other during the opening round of the playoffs, Grangeville and St. Mary's, in basically a de facto playoff game. And that was kind of an interesting game. It was a low scoring game, and Grangeville basically took their traditional offense and threw it out the window and ran a wing T essentially, totally threw St. Mary's off balance, and they won 21-7. So yeah.
You get those games where you don't have a lot of time to prepare and you go against historical stuff and what you've seen on film all year, it throws a wrench in things. So, I mean, we've been seeing and I don't want to go back to the 4A, but we've been seeing Sandpoint throw their wrinkle where they'll run a wing T formation, a lot of their stuff. I mean, that could give teams some fits this year in the postseason too, especially if you get into inclement weather. So, but yeah, the 2A look, I mean, St. Mary's, you don't know, they could show up in the spread. So you never know what happens. So yeah, it could get interesting. The 1A D1, I think, I mean, we got tie breaks in a situation in almost every division in North Idaho right now, except for like one that's already been settled. But Lakeside obviously took care of business the first time they played Wallace, but now they've got to play him again. And it's if Wallace wins, we could have another Kansas City tiebreak. So yeah, the Monday night gets interesting in North Idaho. Let's put it that way. We got our own Monday Night Football up here.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And we talk about this because I think this is the most realistic of all the tiebreaker scenarios we talked about, because Lakeside only won 56-52 that first time. I've been so impressed with Wallace and the improvement that they've made, not just from last year to this year, but week to week. You can see that Wallace is a team that's getting better and getting more confident. And Lakeside, they've been banged up this year. They've had to overcome some injuries and things of that nature. And so this game to me truly is a toss-up. I think it could go either way.
The one thing about Lakeside that I'll give them is if you want to go athlete on athlete, I give Wallace the edge. Or not Wallace. I give Lakeside the edge. Vander Brown, we've talked about him at the beginning of the season, but we've seen what he's able to do. They've got another couple of receivers and a running back that are just as solid. Up front, I know that they were beat up. And that was where, they took a few lumps this year, was when their offensive line and defensive line was banged up. They weren't able to block as well. Obviously, they're moving some of their running backs to the offensive line, and you take away some of your playmakers. But, Lakeside, if you go athlete on athlete, I'd give them the edge. But if you're going based on improvement through the year, Wallace is going to make this very, very interesting. And Wallace plays very sound team football. They're not turning it over a lot anymore, which has been boding very well for their against competition, especially playing some better teams. They've been in more ball games.
Yep. So that kind of completes our tour of the football landscape. I did want to real quick just give a shout out to the Post Falls volleyball team for winning the district title last night, clinching a spot at state. Really, coming into the season, we thought Coeur d'Alene would be the favorite, and maybe Lake City, but
Lake City made a run in the middle of the season. Yeah, it's been interesting, but Post Falls has been steady. Yeah. The Trojans look good.
Congratulations to them.
Yeah, and we talked about earlier in the year, Post Falls playing some of those really tough tournaments over in Washington was going to pay dividends down the road, and we've been seeing it down the stretch. So congrats to the Trojans.
And I think Lakeland did that too this year, and I think it's gonna start paying off for Lakeland. Obviously, they won the regular season title. They'll play Moscow in the title match, and I think Lakeland is battle tested. Their overall record may not look great because they played a lot of good teams, but I think Lakeland's ready to make a run too. So
Lakeland definitely, their chances of hardware. Obviously, got to beat Moscow tonight. We can't keep counting them for a championship and pull a Sandpoint, but we don't want to jinx anybody here.
Just go away, Moscow. We've had enough.
Exactly. Well, yeah, and so Lakeland, though, they, like you said, like they defending state champions, and they've got some upperclassmen leadership that was there last year. They got to jump on that ride, and obviously Katie Ryan was an amazing player that's having a great career or start to her career at WSU. But there's still a lot of talent there. Addie Kiefer she's a stud. So Lakeland's got some talent to make some noise in the 4A ranks. You kind of throw records out the window at this point.
Yep, absolutely. We'll have a lot to talk about next week, Ryan. We will have actual state football brackets. The tiebreakers will have been settled. We don't have to do the math anymore. I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, tax season's over for us. You don't have to crunch numbers anymore. And
yeah, pretty much. And we'll probably, I don't want to jinx anybody again. Let's just say there's a good chance we're talking about some soccer stuff too.
Yep. Yeah. I think that definitely will enter the conversation next week in the Prepcast, and we will be looking at a lot of football games in this district. So it's going to be exciting.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning into the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, brought to you by the Idaho Division of Public Health. For Ryan Scaggs, I'm Brandon Baney. We'll see you next time on IdahoSports.com.